Hello and welcome to Creature Club, your favorite relatively weekly podcast.
Approximately weekly, as far as you are concerned.
Where a bunch of us podcast bros talk to you about D&D stuff. Today we are going to be doing a episode of Treasure Trove, since our delightful Mikey DC won't be joining us. He has other engagements because he's a busy musical fantastic
He's a
boy.
busy bee.
So
Except he's a bee that can play the guitar.
Yeah, which is very much more impressive than a standard Class 1B.
Yeah, who just kisses flowers and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, you kiss flowers.
Yeah. Only
So-
kiss them for peoples.
I save my
And
kisses.
dogs sometimes.
Yep,
But only if they're
yep.
good boys.
And my cat once in a while.
Yeah.
So, today's episode is myself, Tim, and my good buddy Daniel.
Hello. I'm Daniel, and I've just realized there's some root beer on my laptop. God damn it, that root
Oh,
beer
no.
got everywhere.
Daniel had a small incident before the episode with a root beer where it assaulted him.
I mean, I
After-
did start it, so...
You did, actually, technically. So this is your own fault. It's your own making this situation.
It's all true.
So today we will be diving into the D items. The items begin with D. We have already done the Deck of Many Things in its own special episode.
Yes, we did, yeah.
So we will be skipping that one in the middle. I recommend going back and listening to it because we had a good time talking about all the random little bits and bobs and history and any equivalences we could make between it and Major Arcana and Minor Arcana.
Yeah.
It was a fun one.
We should define what Treasure Trove is for those listeners who maybe haven't encountered an episode before in the wild.
Of course, my mistake. So Treasure Trove is the special little episodes where we dive into the defined items in the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide. They start on page 134 and they just go alphabetically from there. And that is basically how we are reading through them. We dive into a little bit of history if there is any, but mostly we stick to what is defined in the Dungeon Master's Guide. And then we imagine situations that we would use them and we comment on them and see how much we like or dislike them.
Yeah.
Just improv around them pretty much.
Yeah, it's a similar format to what we normally do. There's a little bit less emphasis on sort of lore and history and a bit more just discussion on the item itself, the consequences of its mechanics in your game, and ways that you could use it both sort of for your players to have and even equipping your villains with it and seeing how that changes your game.
Indeed. And a good time we do have with that. So,
Yes.
without much further ado, let's dive into the D items.
Oh, that was nice.
Thanks. Avoid alliteration always.
Oh.
So Daniel, would you like to read our first little buddy here?
I will indeed. The first item in the book, in the D's, is Daern's Instant Fortress. Is it Daern or is it like Daern or
It's like Darn.
Daern, Daniel?
It's like somebody who
back at
doesn't
it
want to
again.
say damn. Yeah, oh darn, darn.
It is a wondrous item and it is rare. You can use an action to place this 1-inch metal cube, so about the size of, I guess, of an average D6, on the ground and speak its command word. The cube rapidly grows into a fortress that remains until you use an action to speak the command word that dismisses it, which works only if the fortress is empty. The fortress is a square tower, 20 feet on a side and 30 feet high, with arrow slits on all sides and a battlement atop it. Its interior is divided into 2 floors. The latter ends at a trapdoor leading to the roof. When activated, the tower has a small door on the side facing you. The door opens only at your command, which you can speak as a bonus action. It is immune to the knock spell and similar magic, such as that of the Chime of Opening, which is a magic item we covered last time in the Seas. Each creature in the area when the fortress appears must make a DC 15 dexterity saving throw, taking 10d10 bludgeoning damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. In either case, the creature is pushed to an unoccupied space outside of, but next to, the fortress. Objects in the area that aren't being worn or carried take this damage and are pushed automatically. The tower is made of adamantine. Okay, cool. And its magic prevents it from being tipped over.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Oh,
They're,
jeez.
they're tipping over the fort. The roof, the door, and the walls each have 100 hit points, immunity to damage from non-magical weapons, excluding siege weapons, and resistance to all other damage. Only a wish spell can repair the fortress. This use of the spell counts as replicating a spell of 8th level or lower. Each casting of wish causes the roof, the door, or one wall to regain 50 hit points.
So this is the opposite to our red faction reference that we made the other day. You can only damage it with enormously powerful abilities.
Yeah,
and
true.
It will stay standing. It won't tip over. It'll just be damaged.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was quite the mouthful of a.
It's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, but I think all of that clarification is necessary to like kind of cover all the aspects of what you would expect from an instant fortress.
I think it's interesting because the thing that I think is indicative of like the sort of like 5th edition and maybe even D&D as a game is that we don't know really anything about the inside of the fortress.
Yeah.
Like we don't know what it looks like. We don't know like what comforts it has or like what it can be used to hold. We just know how it works in terms of how it is activated and its consequences in the world in terms of how we traditionally deal with it mechanically, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like all of the rulings are like, this is its size. This is how you can attack out of it. This is how you can lock it so that no one else can get inside.
Yeah.
Here's the ways it can be damaged. Here's the ways it's immune to being damaged. You know what I mean? Like, it's just interesting.
I think that they avoid purposefully going into that much detail because it is a game of your imagination. So everybody who imagines an instant fortress with those exact dimensions is going to be slightly different. Like I see it as one of the little kind of tower houses from like Age of Empires. You know, the kind of end walls when they build like a stone wall. Like that's what I'm seeing when I think of this. I'm like, oh, it's not like a fortress, like a massive, huge thing with enormous battlements. It's a small 20-foot by 20-foot by 30-foot small house, essentially. It's more of a hut than a fortress, but it's virtually impenetrable, even through relatively magical means. Well, through any unmagical means, it's pretty much impenetrable. But yeah, it's a cool little thing. I like it. I like that it does damage as well. Like, I'd imagine, I probably, if one of the enemies passed the dexterity throw, I would say that they just kind of jumped out of the way and don't take damage, but anybody who doesn't get out of the way would probably take the full damage, I think. Even if that is a little bit contrary to the kind of dexterity saving throw idea.
What's interesting is that basically every piece of ruling for this item is exactly how the item has always worked. So I actually did some research.
Oh.
And I was able to find the first edition version of Dane's from the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, which is on page 142, according to the internet, the most reliable source of all. And it's all there. Like there's, you know, what's interesting is the only difference is that it's a little different in how it takes damage. But like that's it. Like so in first edition terminology, the ruling is this metal cube is of small size. When activated, it grows to form a metal tower, 20 square and 30 high, with arrow slits on all sides and a maculated battlement atop it. I don't know what that means.
Probably specific type of battlement.
Yeah, I presume it's a reference to kind of medieval like fortress design. Atop it, the metal extending 10 feet into the ground. So that's its way of saying it's hard to knock over. It is a small door which will only open to the command of the owner of the fortress, knock spells notwithstanding, exactly like this. The adamantine walls of Daren's instant fortress are totally unaffected by normal weapons other than those of catapult type, so siege weaponry.
Siege weapons.
The whole can take 200 points of damage before the tower collapses. Note that damage sustained is cumulative. The fortress cannot be repaired, although a wish spell will restore 10 points of damage sustained. Whoa. It requires 1 round to cause the fortress to spring up, but the person or persons nearby must be careful not to be caught by its sudden growth, or else they will sustain 10 to 100 hit points of damage, exactly like this. The door will always be facing the owner of the device when it becomes a fortress, and it will open and close instantly at their command.
Wow, yeah, that is virtually the exact same.
Yeah, the only difference is
point changes.
Is details like it says that the doors the roof, the door, and the walls each have 100 hit points, rather than simply saying the whole thing has 200.
And it collapses as soon as you take that.
Yeah, the idea is just like, it's a little more abstracted. Like the damage is just being dealt somewhere.
Yeah.
And also the wish spells are much better at healing it in 5th edition.
Yes.
Healing 50 points rather than 10 points.
But I think, the total health of the thing is substantially more. Like each wall would probably only be like a wall of one of the floors. So that'll be 8 floors.
Oh, I see what you mean, yeah.
And then like this roof or whatever. Although the roof is probably going to come down. So that'll be 800 total. And then 50. It's about the same. So,
it is kind of similar. Even if you said like each of the walls is just, if you said like 4 walls, a roof, and a door, which is 6 items, then you're healing 50 of 6 rather than 10 of 100.
Yeah, totally.
50 of 600 rather than
yes.
10 of 100. But it's not completely dissimilar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, that's it's interesting. So yeah, this is as we've talked about before. What is cool about 5th edition is that it is kind of a love letter to old editions of the games, and it's a very obvious kind of translation, and this is a great example of that, where the rules are basically the same. So yeah,
and so used in combat or in game, I think this is just a very effective camping place, or even just like or even during battle, I suppose, if it does that much damage and it has that much protection to it. It's a good way to avoid battle, or just to, avoid being assaulted in the night. It's very, very utilitarian, I think. It's extremely useful.
Yeah, it's an incredibly practical and powerful piece of equipment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a great example of a way for it to work would be like for some like patron of the party to have an instant fortress. Yeah. But they never move it. So as far as the party's concerned, it's just a regular fort.
Mm-hmm.
Up until the point that then the party is given it as a reward. Or like, like neutral ground, like somewhere that they find and only later discover it's actually an instant fortress.
Yeah, that'd be kind of cool.
Because
like, if you give it to your party at a low level and don't maybe give them all the exact details of how the hit points work, they'll just think, oh, cool, we have this invincible fortress that we can just throw down any time. But then as they get to higher levels, they'll encounter stronger and stronger foes who will be able to damage it very substantially and take it down even. So it's a good way to show the kind of scaling of the abilities of the enemies that you'll be facing later in game, as opposed to the goblins and small boys of the early game.
Yeah, I mean, like I think what I like a lot about this fortress is that it's really, really powerful. And it's the kind of thing that you can give to your players and they'll feel like it's really cool and it's a great reward and it's a really exciting magic item. And you can like let them play with it, and there's a lot of things they can do with it. But what I do feel also is that this is a great example of like one of those items, like when I think I've said before, the idea of like just giving your party a wish spell really early and just seeing what they do with it. This is a great example of that. Like I'd love to give this to a party just to see what they do with it. And like really kind of try to consider like the mechanical connotations of that, like of this, like how, because like obviously it says basically the fortress is impossible to get into aside from through brute force, and it's very very hard to break down. So then like, you can sort of go like, okay, cool. So like, how do I challenge the party with this thing? I have to give them the kind of fights where they won't want to use it, or where they know there's a very deliberate consequence. So like obvious examples would be stuff like you're fighting in a cramped environment, so there's no room to get out the tower. Or you're fighting in a cramped environment and there's like civilian bystanders, so if you do use it, like they'll die. Like but like even other stuff like it says that it has arrow slits, which means it has windows, which means you can get line of sight inside, which means that if you can teleport, you can get inside. If you can turn it, oozes can get inside because they don't have any bones. They don't need. They just need an opening. Like that's what I like, the idea that you go, okay, well, it seems really good, and it specifically says no, don't worry. No one can ever magically break down the door. It never says no one can magically teleport inside. It does not say that.
Yeah, and there are probably almost certainly like deliberate foils to it. Yeah. But there are also like really creative ways that you can use it. Like a way that came to me was like if you're trying to like defend some people inside a city, but they can't escape or something. Like if you're in a city that's under siege, and then you realize that there are people that are already inside the city, you could put some of the like villagers and stuff into this little tower just to keep them safe for a bit.
Yeah.
You know, there's a couple little utility things that you can do with it, or like keeping certain things safe. But yeah, there are definite ways that if you have a cunning enough villain, that they will definitely be able to work around it, or even just as dumb as a news, and it's just like
Yeah, and I mean, like, and on that subject, like a thing that any creature can do, like that doesn't require a great amount of intellect, is like if they build a big tower, and like there's some spiders around, the spiders will probably just lay webs everywhere like they would for flies, and you get out of your tower, it's like, okay, when you leave, like, you know, the tower won't go away until everyone gets out, and you're gonna starve in there if you wait too long. So, so yeah, another kind of thing to think about is like, if it's a 30-foot tall tower, what is the consequence of that to the environment? Like, what creatures notice that wouldn't maybe normally be provoked by the party?
Yeah.
Do
like
bad
if
guys?
you put it up suddenly in a like a small canopy, like people are going to notice just this big tower sticking out of the canopy. If they have any kind of aerial view, they're going to spot it and like, oh, there they are. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like,
well, it is defendable. It's not like flawless.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's very cool. I really like it. I think it's really interesting, and I really like it as almost a thing to both either give to either a sort of a villain as their ace in the hole, because that would be really interesting for the party to have to deal with, because I can imagine low-level confrontations would be very difficult if the bad guys can just retreat at any time. And like low-level players really can't deal with this kind of item. But comparatively, then, like if they do eventually beat the villain, they get the item for themselves. And like how kind of satisfying that'll be as a result.
I can think of there's an item coming up later that I think would be a cool foil that even for like a lower level person you could use against it. So I'm gonna hold on to it until we get down to those little items. So there's a little.
Ooh.
We're gonna have a callback later.
Little teaser. So,
shall we move on?
Yes.
The next item is the Dagger of Venom. Nice and generic. It is a weapon dagger, and it is rare. You gain a +1 bonus to attack and damage rolls made with this magic weapon. You can use an action to cause thick black poison to coat the blade. The poison remains for 1 minute, or until an attack using this weapon hits a creature. That creature must succeed on a DC 15 Constitution saving throw or take 2d10 poison damage and become poisoned for 1 minute. The dagger can't be used this way again until the next dawn. So nice. Classic assassin's
nice and simple.
Little,
absolutely,
little weapon. I mean that's kind of the classic way that you would use it. Like this is a dagger for your rogue. Your rogue is going to use this because they are like in and out assassinations. Well, I suppose you're specifically your assassin rogues. You know?
Yeah, if I were to level a criticism at this, it would only be that getting the poison as an action can be kind of like, oh man, I was gonna do a thing, but now I can't because I spent my whole turn getting a poison. But I suspect the reason for that is because it is supposed to be used by a rogue preceding a sneak attack.
Yeah, like before anybody rolls initiative and before they spring the track, the rogue will click the button to make it happen and then attack 6 seconds later or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And he'll be the front line. He'll be the surprise attack round, and then everyone else can rush in and attack. Because or even in combat, actually, like if the party is surprised, to use your first action to get an extra 2d10 poison damage on a weapon, like that's quite a bit more than you would usually get on any other kind of weapon.
The damage is good, which I think is partly like because of the fact that they know it takes an action to activate. So like I think it's a very like simple weapon. It's a great weapon to give to like your sort of slightly bad like villains, like you know, if you're like, if the party get ambushed by like some thugs or whatever, or like some, even like some assassins, for example, this would be a great way to make them like go bah with the poison, and someone goes, oh god, it actually really hurt. Like
I think it would be a cool thing to give to like a kind of a noble villain. Well, noble as in they're kind of higher ups. They're like the kind of bureaucracy
courtly villain.
kind of, courtly, and they'll have their like famous sword taken away from them, but they have this dagger up their sleeve, and if your players don't roll a good enough investigation check, they'll miss it, and then he'll stab one of them and try to escape or something. It's definitely the like the kind of clandestine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it suits that very well. I think it would. I think a couple of things you could do to make this weapon maybe a little more interesting, without necessarily making it like too dangerous or overpowered or anything, would be like maybe give it some cool ability, like you know, your players, you like when you want to hide it on you, you get advantage. Something that makes it kind of like, you know, an assassin's blade, where it's like, you know, when you make a sleight of hand check to hide the weapon on your person, you have advantage, or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
So just something, because like that's how I think Pathfinder does it. I don't know if there is a formalized rule system in it for it in 5th edition, like a system, but basically it's like when you want to hide something on you, like contraband, the idea is like you roll sleight of hand and they roll perception, and whoever gets better wins. So like a great example would be like, oh, this weapon, because it's designed for like assassins and stuff, you get advantage when you try to hide it on your person, so it's a little easier. You're a little more likely to sneak it into the bowl, for example, and then cut off the king's head.
With a poison dagger. I think it could also be cool to use it as like the dagger of false life, like the one where you stab a person and they have all the appearances of being dead, but they're not. Like you could stab someone with it and then steal them away into the night, and then everybody thinks they're dead, but then they come back later. Oh my gosh!
Fuck!
And they might be corrupted or something.
So it's a nice simple weapon. It's
very like dynamic. Like you can use it a lot of different ways.
Oh yeah. Like all simple weapons fits. Like, you know what I mean. Like it's like a good hat. It goes with lots of things.
Indeed.
But yeah, so it's solid. I do feel like maybe my instinct says it's sort of like, it's not very exciting, and I always worry that magic items should be exciting, but it is also very practical. I think it's the kind of weapon I could easily imagine. Like I don't think I'd put this in a treasure hoard. I think I'd give this to a bad guy and let the players take it off them. You know what I mean? Like if I was like, yeah, you found a treasure chest and it's got like some good daggers in it.
Daggers,
you know? Like they'd be like, oh, okay, fine, like cool, these are useful. But like versus like, oh, it's a sword and it's on fire, and when it touches something else, it sets that on fire, and oh, you're on fire, like, you know, like, and they're like, what? like you know, like, or like it's armor but it makes you invisible or something. I don't know. I'm making it up. Whereas like, yeah, the dagger venom is like very rules light, very practical, but would suit as a result the bad guy very well.
Agreed.
And
good old dagger of venom.
Yeah, it's fine. This one's a bit more exciting.
Indeed.
The dancing sword weapon, any sword, very rare. It's hard to find. Requires attunement. You can use a bonus action to toss this magic sword into the air and speak the command word. When you do so, the sword begins to hover, flies up to 30 feet, and attacks one creature of your choice within 5 feet of it. The sword uses your attack roll and ability score modifiers to damage rolls. While the sword hovers, you can use a bonus action to cause it to fly up to 30 feet to another spot within 30 feet of you. As part of the same bonus action, you can cause the sword to attack. That's a weird use of cause. It should be you can use the sword. I'm sorry. This is the official rulebook. I shouldn't be telling them what they do. You can cause the sword. Oh, whoops! Accidentally, I caused the sword to attack one creature. You know what I mean? Like it's weird. Like it.
Yeah.
To attack one creature within 5 feet of it. After the hovering sword attacks for the 4th time, it flies up to 30 feet and tries to return to your hand. If you have no hand free, it falls to the ground at your feet. If the sword has no unobstructed path to you, it moves as close to you as it can, then falls to the ground. It also ceases to hover if you grasp it or move more than 30 feet away from it.
Whew.
So this thing's cool.
Yeah, it is
I don't
quite
think
good.
that's a surprise to anyone.
I have a couple kind of comments on it, like specifically for the thing that you were that we found that was a little bit of a trip up. It's like early on it says it attacks one creature of your choice within 5 feet of it. So I think they like addendumed that, like it will attack a creature within 5 feet of it. Like they put in of your choice, and then later on it just says it'll you can cause it to attack something because maybe they changed it to be of your choice. Whereas
Yeah, it's probably because it
kinda
says it's
switched
part
it
of the same
around.
bonus action.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
they're trying to make it clear that it's all one action is causing this effect.
indeed. Also, sorry to anyone who can hear some construction sounds. My mother is doing some work on the studio.
DIY.
Yeah, we're getting several new roofs put in. Not enough walls, but definitely more roofs. I need more roofs.
Cool. More higher, better, stronger roofs.
Thicker, more waterproof.
Get rid of so much rain. Okay, sorry. Dancing sword.
So I think that this is a very cool one to give to a fighter who is probably quite low level, especially if they are the only like either close-up fighter or the only like non-caster. Like if they are just a standard fighter that has probably taken maybe maneuvers or something, because like this is basically just an extra attack to be more effective on the ground. Like
Yeah, I know what you mean, yeah.
yeah, like I found myself being a little bit frustrated when I was trying to just be a fighter boy swinging my sword, when I'd run up and stab a guy and be like, yeah, and then they would suddenly be obliterated by the wizard or the druid.
Oh,
like,
piss.
yeah, just area of effects. Like this kind of spreads out your ability to kind of harry your enemies and get in their way and deal broader damage, as opposed to just being reserved to your kind of like 15-foot square that you can affect, being just
Yeah.
a sword boy.
So my observations about it. I really like it as an item. It's very cool. It's really dynamic. Because it just lets basically like you say, Tim, like it increases your like for most characters it improves them. Like it almost, it's more of a horizontal than a vertical improvement. Do you know what that means? Like the
Yeah.
idea that like it gives you a wider skill set, not a I have +1 to punch your face off. It's more like now I can also hit people 30 feet away with a sword, like
Yeah.
as well as
And
I'm like I'm
just
able to
uses
literally
the-
fight on two fronts. Like
Yeah. It uses the same attack rolls and ability scores, so it's not an improvement on your abilities. It's just more of them.
yes, yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, I really like it. I really like that it uses your bonus action. I think that's really cool. I think a lot of fighters, especially like like two great weapon fighters and stuff, might not necessarily always have something to do with their bonus action,
Yeah.
aside from like action surge and second wind.
Second wind.
Yeah. But like when they don't want to use those, they're sort of like, well, like, so like I like that it uses your bonus action, which is something you don't get to use as much. Although that is also something to consider if you want to give this if you want to give this weapon to a player as a reward. If they fight with two weapons, they are already using their bonus action.
Yes.
And that's true for a lot of classes. Like the rogue uses their bonus action a lot, and so does the bard with their inspiration. So just be aware. Like it's interesting because it's an example of a weapon where like there will probably be parties who don't want to use it that much. Like there, I can imagine fighters being. I can imagine a party of people getting a dancing sword, and because they're a party that sort of uses all their bonus actions and stuff, and the only person who doesn't is the wizard, who's actually not that good at hitting things with a sword.
Yeah.
But it's technically correct to give it to the wizard action economy wise, but that's weird because why would the wizard like want the dancing sword and like
Yeah.
and it's not very accurate. So then the wizard's just rolling d20s and hoping to get a good number. Like so yeah.
Like at that point, you're basically like maximizing the amount of hits, and you're not really like playing D&D. Well,
Yeah, and,
not really.
it
People who play
depends on-
D&D like that is just
Yeah,
as legitimate.
it totally
but it's-
depends. But like
Yeah.
it is a case of, because I think that like the intended use of this is it lets a fighter like fight on two fronts in a cool way. It's very
Yes.
exciting and dynamic. And that doesn't mean that wizards aren't allowed to have it, for example. But it's just like, it's an interesting observation that like a lot of the time spellcasters are the ones who don't get to use their bonus actions. And so I can imagine how this item would seem most useful to them, and then it sort of isn't because it's less accurate and stuff like that. So just like sort of, yeah, it's interesting because I do think it's very cool. I really like it. But I can imagine how some parties might just end up using it as like a magic sword. Because it deals magic damage, which means it ignores resistances a lot of the time and stuff.
Yeah, it would be a cool thing to give to maybe an ally, like a DMPC, essentially, just to have them maybe have this cool edgy thing that they do, you know, make them a bit more interesting, or to give to an enemy to make it a broader fight, you know. Like,
yeah.
Although, well, yeah, actually, yeah, like just giving them this little extra thing that they do, or maybe they have one extra dude in their villain squad that has this dancing sword as well as their own matching sword, and like you have them fighting at the same time and they're swinging the same way, kind of thing.
Yeah,
just
that
for
could be
flavor
cool.
wise.
Yeah,
but then like if your party doesn't want to use it, I mean, they can still pick it up and be like, cool, singing dancing
cool.
sword.
Yeah, dancing queen. Yeah, no. Overall, I think it's a really cool item. I think it's very like it's just cool. It's just a cool magic item that like feels really old school fantasy. Like it feels like something that would fit alongside Excalibur.
Yeah,
it's a good weapon. It's yeah, and I really like it. I'm a big fan. It's interesting. It's interesting the fact that you get to use it 4 times and then it's done. I wonder what that's based on.
I was gonna mention that. I forgot about that. Like, I think that I would probably remove that caveat because, like, you use your bonus action to activate it, and then it goes out and uses your bonus action in preceding turns. And if like there are already things that will cause it to return to you, like you don't need that extra thing to keep track of for your players. Like that kind of bothered me a little bit about it.
Yeah. That's yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because I know it's an old school thing. Like I know that in Pathfinder, for example, the dancing sword also has a 4-round limitation.
Okay.
Although interestingly, it's not based on how many times it attacks. It's based on how a number of rounds. Whereas this says after this hovering sword attacks for the 4th time, it flies up to 30 feet and tries to return to your hand, rather than after 4 rounds, even though you can normally only make 1 attack a round. I will say what's not mentioned here is, and I think the assumption is that it can't, but can the dancing sword make attacks of opportunity? Because it doesn't say here, and so my assumption is it doesn't, because I assume the rules for attacks of opportunity in 5th edition specify a creature that you try to move away from gets to attack you, and this isn't a creature, it's an item. But what's kind of interesting is that if this could attack using its reactions as an attack of opportunity, then it would last less time on the battlefield, because it makes 4 attacks. But then it would be able to make more attacks every round, so then it would last less time. And like, so I'm just thinking, like, I wonder, is that actually an interesting design space you could explore, where you say it can make attacks of opportunity, but you'll basically use it up faster, but you'll make more attacks.
Yeah. If you have it covering like a specific spot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It'll be used up quicker if you basically turn on reactions mode. Like you put it onto automatic pilot.
Yeah.
It's like, slice them up, boy.
Yeah, so I don't know. Like, I think the only thing there is that it's like it seems like it's not actually an interesting design decision, because like why would you not make the attacks of opportunity, because they're free attacks and you're just using them up faster, and it doesn't matter because the only thing you can do with it is make attacks. So for it to be interesting, you have to find something else for those resources to be spent on. So you need to be like, okay, but you can spend 2 rounds of combat to do a super attack, or to shoot a beam of light, or to cause it to split into 2 swords, and now you've got 2 dancing swords that you can both command with the same bonus action.
Oh my goodness.
which would be sort of like weird and hardcore and
Yeah.
definitely not something to throw at a new player. Like
A
they'd be
little
like,
tricky
what?
and unwieldy to take control of. But
You
yeah.
have 7 rounds. You have 7 discrete rounds to spend on various mechanics. You can spend them on attacks, or
You
they
can
be
keep
spent-
it
no,
as one
no.
great sword, or 2 long swords, or 7 daggers.
7 daggers.
Although the sword, the art that they have in the book is one of my favorite designs for a sword.
Oh,
But
the
it
little
also
feathered
seems
wings
a little bit impractical because
with the weird grip. Yeah.
yeah, there's just those 3 spikes sticking out of the grip.
Ouch. Well, it's
I
because
wanna
you're not
hold on
supposed
to
to fight
that
with it. You're
sword.
supposed to drop it and let it fight.
But it actively doesn't want you to hold it, even
Yeah,
though it's going to
'cause it
fly
wants
back
to
to your
dance.
hand. I want to dance.
I want to dance, father.
Yeah.
Yes, dancing sword's very cool. There is a monster in Castlevania called the Hunting Girl. I don't remember. I've never
Okay.
played. Sorry, Symphony of the Night, which I've never played. I've just seen it being played. But in it, there are these like swords that appear to be like invisible dancing swords, but as they go to attack you, like a ghostly woman appears, and she's
Oh.
actually the one wielding the sword. That could be
goodness.
something cool you could incorporate into your weapons, that they're actually being like carried by dead soldiers. And so you maybe
Yeah.
get flashes of them occasionally, or maybe like when someone casts detect magic or something similar, they can see a little bit of that ghost.
Or you have to encounter the sword, which is basically possessed by this other soul, but you have to like
Oh yeah,
help it return
Pokemon.
to some, yeah. You have to return it to like you have to like avenge its death or something that is causing the soul to be unhappy, and then it'll just work for you. Like,
Yeah,
I
that's a cool
remember
idea as
in
well. I like that,
one
yeah.
of the earliest games that you ran for me, I got I think it was a cool sword, or no, I got a cool brooch, I think, that protected me from fire because I helped the spirit of a lady who was burned alive or something.
It wasn't a brooch though. It was just it was a blessing.
Yes.
But yes, that is
Yes.
correct. Yeah, you solved the riddle. You solved my riddle, adventurers. No, you showed up and you put a ghost to rest, and everyone got a benefit based on what they'd done. And
Yeah.
so it was a woman who was accused of being a witch, and so she was being burned at a stake. And this had happened years and years ago, and so it was being played out over and over again with ghosts, just
Yeah.
playing the same roles. And it was this woman's tortured spirit that was doing it. And so the party intervened because they're all good boys. And you threw yourself on the fire to get her out of the stake. And so I gave
Sure
you
did.
resistance to fire damage because I was like, well, obviously you were the bravest and you did that, so you get that. And then like Jonathan, who was playing Ira the Paladin, he got a benefit where undead trying to resist his Turn the Unholy, his channel divinity power, had disadvantage because he was better at scaring ghosts. Marco got he got the Undead Lore Master, which gave him advantage on religion checks to know about spooks. And Varus got I can't remember what I called it, but basically he could set his fists on ghost fire, and then they would deal more damage to the undead.
Yeah.
Probably called Ghost Fire Fists. Honestly, I'm not that
Ghost
creative
Fire
when it comes to
Fists.
naming things, but it was pretty cool.
Yeah, like working that kind of stuff into a game kind of attaches you to the world. Like finding ways to involve your characters in the actions that they have done really like solidifies for them and for yourself, like that they are really interacting with a
Yeah, that's true.
relatively
Yeah.
real world, you know?
Yeah. If you want to, sorry, just on that aside, if you want to skip the whole spooky ghost thing, a really fun, lighthearted way to incorporate this weapon into your campaign would be to have it over the mantelpiece in a tavern, and one night there's a dancing contest, and whichever player does the best dance gets the sword.
Nice.
Because that'd just be like, kooky and fun, and then they get a magic item out of it. And it rewards them for taking part in what seems like an inconsequential part of the world.
It would have to be a very serious dancing competition to win a very rare item in
Well,
the bar.
the idea is that the patrons of the bar don't know it's enchanted, but it wants to serve the best dancer.
So it chooses. Like they
It
just have
chooses, yeah.
this dancing competition every year, but this year the dancing sword
Yeah.
chose its handler.
They did,
That's
yeah.
cool.
They've been having this dancing competition for years, and what they didn't realize was they were always trying. This is where the tradition started. They were always trying to convince the dancing sword to join them, and it's only now that the party have shown up with their nice dancing that they have finally won the sword over. Unless they don't dance, in which case nobody gets the sword, and it just
Yeah.
sits there for another party.
Sits there for another adventure.
But that is another story. Okay.
cool. Dancing sword. Shall we move on?
Yes, please.
Alrighty. The Decanter of Endless Water. It is a wondrous item, and it is uncommon. So, you'll find it more frequently than any of the rest of the stuff. This stoppered flask sloshes when shaken, as if it contains water. The decanter weighs 2 pounds. You can use an action to remove the stopper and speak one of 3 command words, whereupon an amount of fresh water or salt water, your choice, pours out of the flask. The water stops pouring out at the start of your next turn. Choose from the following options. You can say stream, and it produces 1 gallon of water, which is, pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
And then you can say fountain, and it produces 5 gallons of water, which is obviously a bit of a heavier flow.
Yeah.
Or you can say geyser, and it produces 30 gallons of water that gushes forth in a geyser 30 feet long and 1 foot wide. As a bonus action, while holding the decanter, you can aim the geyser at a creature you can see within 30 feet of you. The target must succeed on a DC 13 strength saving throw or take 1d4 bludgeoning damage and fall prone. Instead of a creature, you can target an object that isn't being worn or carried and that weighs no more than 200 pounds. The object is either knocked over or pushed up to up to 15 feet away.
Up
200
to
pounds.
200
200
feet away. It leaves the stratosphere. It goes to space.
That's it. That's a cool item,
Yeah, it's nice
it-
because it's a great example of an item that has one very obvious use and then infinite not obvious uses.
Yeah. Like one of the characters from early on in Critical Role had a decanter of endless water, and they just used it at like every opportunity. It was kind of a quirky thing for this guy. He's just like, oh, I have my bottle of endless water, and I can pour out some water for you. He was a very quirky character as was, but like the geyser thing, like I think they were flying across something on a flying carpet, but the flying carpet was moving too slow, so he used geyser out the back of it, and it just whoosh, kind of whooshed it forwards.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well.
Yeah, like
It'd be a great
as
method of propulsion.
I'm pretty sure they did that. It was over the little bone section where there were just like dusted bones everywhere. People will correct me if we have any fans of Critical Role.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like this item. This is a great so this is a nice item for a couple of reasons. First of all, so the thing is, like, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of spells like Create Food and Water because they nullify survivalism in a very boring way. But I don't mind so much when it's an item, because that's not like I just played a cleric, so now I never need to worry about food. Like, this is like hey, we found this item, we earned it somehow, and now we don't have to worry about water.
Yeah.
And then it produces some amount of water, and the amount of water is sort of like, it doesn't really matter that much, really.
It'll basically remove the need to think, do we have water?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
If you come across a person who is dying of thirst in the desert, and you have to think to yourself, wait a second, are any of our water skins full? Like, the only times that'll come about is in situations like that, and you don't want to like halt your progress, like to tell your players, oh, you have to refill your water skins because you've arrived at the next town and there's a well nearby, because like keeping track of that is, while it is like,
it depends on the kind of game. I think
I like running the kind of like keeping control of the economics of like the food that you have, and like I always ask to buy rations whenever I go to shops. I think I've kind of slowed down on it now because it just kind of interrupts play. But
I think it depends on the game, but yeah. I think I can totally understand what you mean. Like, if you're interested in keeping count of rations, but no one else in the party is, then it's sort of like, well,
yeah, like this isn't the game that they want to be playing, and I don't want to interrupt them or make them feel bad for not doing it.
Exactly. Yeah, it depends. Like, I think there is. I think survivalism is interesting. I think I'd like to do a campaign where you kind of escalate the survivalism. So initially it's like, oh no, we don't have food and water, and then eventually, and then like, you get food and water, you maybe get the decanter or you find something similar, but then later on it's like, oh no, the land is made of lava, like, and only like our iron hulled boat is the only thing that can cross it, and if the iron ever gets too hot, it'll melt and everyone on board will die. And like, just the idea of escalating that sort of like, start off with something simple but keep like turning up the heat slightly, and just you're like on the one hand, these enemies are a pain in the ass. On the other hand, like, our star jammer through the astral plane has just lost an engine, and now we're drifting through the astral sea, and we don't know where we're going or when we're going to be able to like return to our bodies or whatever's going on.
Yeah. If you ran a like post-apocalypse game, this would be a hugely powerful item,
Yes.
because that's the kind of survivalism thing that you're really going to need to do. Because most people, when they run a world in D&D, it's like a world of plenty. Like there is no lack of food, and there are huge civilizations with like farms and all kinds of place, and it's either that or it's like wildlands or just completely arid desert that you're just like, oh, people travel this desert all the time. They know what you need and they give it to you, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas if you wanted to run like a survivalist campaign where you had to keep track of things because there is so little around, like there's sparsity in everything that they have.
Yeah.
Like they'll have to keep track of ammunition and food and water and stuff like that. And this would be an incredible boon to a party if they came across it in that kind of situation.
Yeah. In terms of like, that was actually something else I wanted to touch on. What's interesting is that in the language of D&D, it is an uncommon magic item, which means that it's appropriate for a group of levels 1 to 5 as a magic item to give them as a reward for doing a dungeon or doing a quest or whatever.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is, obviously, like in the right environment, this item is much, much more important. Like I'm imagining how interesting it would be to have a party maybe have this item for a while, maybe get used to it, and then travel to somewhere that's very desertified, very dry, and they need to rely on this item a lot more. And then they reach like a civilization, or they reach some sort of impasse, and the entity in question, the person or the entity that they're dealing with, basically says, like, if you don't give me that, I'll give you what you need to continue on whatever journey you're on, but I want your decanter. And like, they might even say like, are you sure that's all you want, like with the other items we have? And like just the idea of like two people in that environment, the idea of just something that makes infinite water is so much more valuable.
Yeah.
And like I think that's pretty interesting. And I could even see an interesting game being made out of like the like kind of like almost like the economic consequences of it, like the idea of like, hey, we've set up a guild hall in this desert town and we have a decanter of endless water. Like, let's just leave it on all the time.
Yeah.
And just let people use the water we have because we've got infinite and there's no reason not to.
Just have somebody always beside it who basically just says fountain.
Just teach a parrot to say the word fountain and you're done.
Well, I presume that it's like an active word, but yeah, I mean,
who knows?
It would be
Maybe
cool actually if you were like walking through the forest and you knew of this item, but and you had heard that somebody had like lost one out in the desert, and you just walk around the desert saying geyser every 30 or so feet, and then just suddenly just
that would be
massive
very
geyser bursts out of the sand.
That'd be cool.
It's like beachcombing, except in the desert, with much more dramatic consequences.
Yeah, true. But yeah, so like, yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting item. I like it. I like how it's really straightforward, and I think my only I guess not, maybe qualm is like too hard a word. I think my only like sort of my only point would be, I feel like it's a shame that geyser is you take an action to speak the command word and remove the stopper, and then it's a bonus action to aim the geyser at something.
Right.
I guess in fairness, you can have already aimed it before you opened it, but I feel like it's just, I was just thinking like, it's kind of a shame that it's both an action and a bonus action, because I could see some players deciding not to do it because they feel like it takes too much of their turn.
Yeah, like turn economy is very conscious, because if you are in a relatively large party, you want to do something cool and effective.
Cool on your turn, yeah, of course,
and you want to do a bunch of stuff, not just maybe one big thing.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, like, I do think it's a cool usage, and in fairness, like, it is a long-ranged attack that deals damage and also knocks them prone. So it's especially at low levels, it's actually not bad. It's basically like a little better than a cantrip. So in that sense, I could see it being useful to give to a spellcaster, because the idea, like, oh well, the fighter and the rogue and that sort, they always have their weapons on them, so they've almost always got some flexibility. But maybe the spellcasters are worried about like running out of spells, or their current cantrips wouldn't help as much. And obviously, like, if you are the wizard and the other two party members are like, say, a rogue and a fighter, they will really appreciate if you spend your turn knocking someone else prone.
Totally.
Like,
Yeah.
they will be in love with you if you spend your turn knocking someone prone, like over multiple turns.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I can see it being a nice kind of a backup combat item for somebody who isn't maybe
Totally.
as combat oriented.
Yeah.
Um,
Or like a combo move that you can
Yeah,
arrange
exactly. Yeah,
with someone like that. Yeah.
yeah,
Cool.
nice 1-2 punch. But yeah, so yeah, cool. Not like doesn't break the game over its knee except for the survivalist part, but that's fine because the game is already makes a joke of that, so it's not real. Like yeah, myself and a friend of mine, Rob, who obviously our friend Rob, who is also a friend of the podcast. He and I were talking at one stage, and like we, because the classic sort of the spiel, the marketing spiel is like D&D is held on 3 pillars: combat, exploration, and socialization. And like, yeah, I was just like, the combat pillar is this big strong stone pillar. The socialization pillar is like a stick. The exploration pillar is not there. It's been taken down, and like it hasn't existed for a long time. People talk a lot about like memories of the exploration pillar, but it doesn't actually exist. It's a myth. Like so, yeah. So and survivalism, I think, is the biggest. The biggest thing that it suffers from that, like when very, very low level spells completely trivialize things like getting lost and needing to eat, versus like, oh well, I have a billion spells that just let me kill another human being. Like,
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I've got like 17 spells for different ways to like inflict harm. Like I'm like a sociopath, and then one spell that's like, and you just eat all the food you need and you're fine. You never need to think about food ever
Like,
again.
The game that Stephen Brady, friend of the podcast, ran for us.
Patron saint.
Patron saint, excuse me. Patron saint of the podcast. Ran for us just the other day was we were in the College of Telenor, and we all had to choose a school of wizardry to follow, and none of us took evocation or abjuration, so none of us were particularly effective in combat, so we had to come up with weird or interesting ways around all of the encounters. Like, most of the encounters were kind of designed for the school, but like we also went on a small adventure where we had to fight a hook horror at second level, and there was a big angry hook horror, and we had to find a way around beating the pants off it, essentially. And yeah, it didn't go well at first, but we, like, all of the different cool utility spells, it takes a bit of creativity to make them work for you, but when you do, it feels so much cooler than just being like, I throw a firebolt, I firebomb him, he is flames now.
Yeah.
It takes a fun bit of creativity to make, like, being the spellcaster memorable or fun or interesting. But it's fun and cool and fun when it is fun.
It's fun and it's cool and it's fun and it's cool.
Fun, cool, and fun.
Fun, cool. And cool and fun.
Cool. So shall we move on to Deck of Illusions?
Yeah, the Deck of Illusions. It's another uncommon wondrous item. This box contains a set of parchment cards. A full deck has 34 cards. A deck found as treasure is usually missing 1d20 minus 1 cards. So anywhere between 0 and 19 cards are missing. The magic of the deck functions only if the cards are drawn at random. You can use an altered deck of playing cards to simulate the deck. You can use an action to draw a card at random from the deck and throw it to the ground at a point within 30 feet of you. An illusion of one or more creatures forms over the thrown card and remains until dispelled. An illusory creature appears real, of the appropriate size, and behaves as if it was a real creature, as presented in the Monster Manual, except that it can do no harm. While you are within 120 feet of the illusory creature and can see it, you can use an action to move it magically anywhere within 30 feet of the card. Any physical interaction with the illusory creature reveals it to be an illusion because objects pass through it. Someone who uses an action to visually inspect the creature identifies it is illusory with the successful DC 15 intelligence investigation check. The creature then appears translucent. The illusion lasts until its card is moved, or the illusion is dispelled. When the illusion ends, the image on its card disappears, and that card can't be used again.
It's interesting. There is a huge list of all the different cards that are used, but it's basically the Ace, King, Queen, Jack, 10, 9, 8, and 2 of each of your standard deck of cards,
Yeah.
and the more valuable the card in a game of poker or whatever, the more dangerous the creature is. So,
Yeah.
do you want to read through the types of animals? that
Yeah,
we
sure.
can
So,
fight?
so it seems like the simplest way to make this deck in the game would be to just deal out have a deck of cards nearby, and then have someone roll for how many cards are missing, and then deal out that number of cards to them.
Indeed.
So playing card. So as you said, Tim. And aces are high, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah, because sometimes they're not. But anyway. So for the hearts, the illusions are Red Dragon, Knight, and 4 guards, Succubus or Incubus, your choice. How fun.
Player's choice.
Dealer's choice. Druid, Cloud Giant, Etten, Bugbear, and Goblin.
Yeah.
Not even multiple goblins. It's so lame.
No, it's like a knight and 4 guards or 1 goblin.
Goblin.
Goblins.
In fairness, there would be a lot of fun if you just kept drawing goblins.
Yeah. This is just a deck of 2 of hearts.
Well, this is just a deck of goblins. There's not supposed to be more than one of these in the deck. Okay, so then these are the diamonds. Beholder, Archmage, and Mage Apprentice. Oh, and Mage Apprentice. Okay, cool. So there's 2 of them again. Night Hag, Assassin, Fire Giant, Ogre Mage, Null, and Kobold.
Nice.
So these are pretty cool.
Yeah. I like the multiples, and they seem to be consistently the king.
Yeah. And it's always like a kind of a person with their subordinates. I really like the idea that the illusory Archmage can do illusory magic. That could be interesting.
Pretty twinkling lights.
Okay, so these are the spades, a lich, a priest, and 2 acolytes, a Medusa, a veteran, a frost giant, a troll, a hobgoblin, and a goblin again. He's back.
More goblins.
He's back in Pog.
It's all 2 of hearts and spades.
Okay, and these are the clubs. Right. The Iron Golem, Bandit Captain, and 3 bandits. Yes. It's probably Erinese.
Erinese, yeah.
Berserker, Hill Giant, Ogre, Orc, Kobold, and then the best one, in my opinion, is the Jokers. They are you, the deck's owner.
So, it doesn't require attunement, though, does it? Yeah, it doesn't.
No, doesn't.
That's funny. It just, when you're holding the deck, it recognizes, I guess it looks at you and it feels the presence of the...
It's magic, Tim. I wouldn't...
No, I need to get to the bottom of this.
I mean, but presumably it's whoever draws the card.
Yeah, probably.
Is my assumption. It doesn't change when you give the deck to someone else.
Yes. Or it would maybe having it be the deck's creator will be one way to...
Spooky.
I mean, in my head, to make that kind of make sense a little bit. Although it is much more effective to have it be whoever has the deck of cards, because you can use them as like the distraction or the whatever they're called, like a scapegoat.
So yeah, so this is pretty cool. I like this item a lot. I think my only criticism of it would be that without knowing what you're going to draw next, it feels like it's going to be hard to know what you can even do.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't necessarily say that you draw at random. Like, it is just a...
Yeah, the magic of the deck functions only if cards are drawn at random.
If the cards are drawn at random. Oh, you're right. Yeah.
So you can't know what you're going to draw next.
So you can't really plan around it.
Yeah, that's. I think that's my only criticism of it, is that you can't. It's not a question of what illusions do I have access to and what will I choose to use to make this point. Where for example, if I told you, okay, you've got 1 red dragon, 2 assassins, 3 goblins and a couple of bugbears or whatever, you would know, obviously, just conceptually, that the red dragon is very different in how it can be used versus the goblins.
Yeah, totally.
And you would plan around that, and you would be and I can imagine great moments of tension where the party are deciding, is now the time to use the illusionary red dragon to scare off our attackers.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's really cool. And I feel like maybe even though the sort of you draw randomly is kind of exciting and sort of a hooray, like pull the cracker, pull the Christmas cracker, and you got a bad hat and a dumb joke, like I almost like not that not that this isn't exciting, but just the idea like it's that kind of fun, right? It's the sort of like surprise fun rather than like like the deck of illusions isn't necessarily a resource that you're like, ooh, how can we use this? How can we like make sure that we use this in a clever way? What cool
it's an extremely unreliable distraction, essentially.
Yeah, basically, yeah. It seems like the only thing it can do is distract things, and it can't do that reliably because you don't know what you're going to get with it.
Yeah. So probably nix that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think my suggestion would be ignore the part of the rules where it says they have to be drawn at random.
Totally.
And just
absolutely same page with that.
Yeah, and maybe to balance that, give them less cards, because I think both, not less so because the breaking the rules, but more like actually because if I gave you like 15 cards with different monsters on them, that'd probably be kind of overwhelming. Whereas if I gave you like 4 and I was like, you've got 4 illusion cards, you can make monsters with them, you'd be like, okay, cool. I immediately, like, if I literally gave you like 4 like actual pieces of paper and one says goblin and one says dragon and one says priest and 2 acolytes and another says like knight, you're like, okay, I know what these do. They make one of these when I drop them on the ground.
And that's all
they do. Yeah, exactly. Like, whereas if I gave you like 17 cards and you're like, give me a minute, like,
do I know what these do? No, and you're not allowed to know which one you're drawing.
But you see, that's the thing, because I think once you tell your player, okay, you've got this deck of cards, when you draw a card from the deck, you create an illusionary version of those creatures, but you can't know what the card you're drawing is, then they'll use it differently, and that's fine. Totally. Whereas I think the idea of giving someone a smaller number of maybe more practical illusions that are still one use only, blah, 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 all that cool stuff, I think that would be really interesting.
Totally. Same page. On board.
Final point, which is actually something that I am immediately very excited about and think is very cool. The spell has no time limit. The illusion lasts until the card is moved or the illusion is dispelled.
Oh.
So
cool.
You could hear stories about a red dragon living up on a mountain for years.
Yeah.
And they don't exist.
Or it just looks like it's sleeping. I wonder, can you dictate what it does?
I think you can.
Yeah.
You can move it with an action. So I think it's also fair to say that you can decide what it's doing.
Yeah.
You can control it in some vague sense.
It sleeps on your trove of gold, and every 30 or so seconds opens one of its eyes and looks around.
Yeah, or and that's what I was thinking when I talked about the idea of slightly more practical illusions, because obviously goblins are kind of useful but not really. But imagine if one of your deck of illusion cards was like a 10-foot wall appears. That'd be great. You're just like, all right, hang on, I know what'll distract these guys. I'll just put down a 10-foot wall, and then they'll think they can't follow us. And that idea of just fucking playing with illusions, because they're cool.
It's not a very effective Yu-Gi-Oh card though.
Yeah.
I fight it with my berserker. I put up a wall. Oh.
Giant soldier of stone, destroy the moon.
Giant golem of iron, destroy the moon.
Smashed up. So
yeah, that's a cool one. You can basically leave fake sentinels to whatever you need to defend, and I mean, as soon as somebody realizes that the first one isn't really there, it's gonna break the illusion.
It's gonna lose effectiveness. Yeah, you can really only do it once, kind of per group of people.
Yeah,
but even still,
this could be a thing to put into our house of multiple traps. We have the rug of smothering and the living armor things, and we could just have a bunch of illusions, but we might also have just temporarily petrified versions of all these things that occasionally come to life. Yeah, that could be cool. Yeah. Our house of fun just got a little more fun.
Welcome to the house of
temptations on its way.
Okay,
nice one.
So, ladies and gentlemen, it is very late at night on the final day before this episode is released, and I'm here to tell you that this is a very long episode, so you're getting a little outro in the middle of the episode, just to let you know that next week is going to be the continuation of this episode, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed the episode so far, but I hope that you leave us a like, leave us a review on iTunes, do all the good stuff, share us with your friends. We appreciate your continued support. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in whenever you do. And I hope you enjoyed this slightly more ASMR outro than usual from your favorite Tim.